Hi everybody and welcome. I'm Pierre and I would like to talk to you about my friend and mentor, the extraordinary painter George Tucker, who received the National Medal of Arts by George W. Bush. He was the first person with my grandmother to encourage me to paint. Now I am not going to get into an intellectual analysis of George's work because I am no scholar, I am just a painter. But I think it's important to know a little bit about his background and his influences. George was born in Brooklyn in 1920, and he received an A.B. degree at Harvard University in 1942. Because of World War II, he joined the Marine Corps Officers Candidate School between 1942 and 1943. After the war, he joined the Art Students League in New York City, where he met his first mentor, Reginald Marsh. You can tell his artwork by the crowded, chaotic scenes of New York City of the 1920s and the 1930s. George then met one of Reginald Marsh's students, Paul Cadmus, one of the influences because he painted with egg tempera, which became one of George Tucker's trademarks. You can tell Paul Cadmus' work by the gritty social interactions in urban settings. And then through him, George Tucker met Jared French, who became his mentor and a close friend. Now all these artists were part of the New York City homosexual scene of the 1950s. New York was the most liberal and open-minded city, just like it is now in the world. George painted outside the mainstream art world. Because of his egg tempera, you could see these incredibly soft and beautiful colors. He also painted the alienation of man in modern society, as you can see by the paintings The Subway that he did in 1950 or The Waiting Room that he did in 1959. You can feel the heat of the summer in his series of Windows. After the death of his longtime partner in 1973, George and his work became more spiritual. George became a Catholic and he moved to Vermont. So when I started to paint in the late 70s and early 1980s, I was living in New York, and the art world that was going on there with the paintings of Basquiat or Keith Haring or many of the Lower East Side artists didn't really please me. I preferred artists that were more political like Sue Coe. So when I went to Vermont and met George Tucker and went for the first time to his studio, he was working on The Waiting Room. Now that painting touched me because I was painting at the same time very similar subjects of anguished people in jungle settings, because I had lived for the last 3 years in South America. Now I was nervous since I was starting to paint, and I was nervous because I was putting military people in my paintings. And I asked George what he thought, if it was a mistake. And he said, "Don't worry about it. Do what you think is right. Paint what you feel. Don't hold back." And for that, I am extremely grateful. He gave me the courage to do the paintings that I did for the next several years. And I would like to conclude this ode for George Tucker by reading a little excerpt of an interview that he did with David Tunkel in 1980. It's a question and answer. The question is, you obviously could be a wealthy man simply by producing more works. I'm curious, why this seemingly simple life? And George answers, I am really not interested in money. I have all that I want. Besides, By most people's standards, I am a wealthy man. If one thinks of average income in the world, I am fed, clothed, and sheltered well. And anyway, there are many people who need the money much more than I do. Rest in peace, George. You are loved and you are missed.